but we definitely have a quorum, so we're going to keep moving. Starting off the day, we're going to ask for some requests for bill introductions. And Representative Estes, would you like to go? Welcome to the committee.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I would like to please introduce 2025 RS 1054. And that is a bill that adopts a seal for the House.
Without any objections, accepted.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Jessica?
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Jessica Lucas with Watkins Public Strategies here today on behalf of our client, Sedgwick County Government, with RS 0872. This would be an introduction to authorize the disposition of the unclaimed remains of deceased persons by district coroners.
Without objection, submitted. Thank you. And welcome to the committee. We're going to move right in on our hearing today. We're going to pause just a second. Are you good? A little technical difficulty. Okay, we're back on speed now. So we're going to open up the hearing on HB 2104. Mike, give us an overview. Thank you, Mike.
Mike Heim with the Revisor of Statutes Office. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this bill would authorize school districts to provide firearm safety programs for the purpose of promoting safety and protection of students and emphasizing how students should respond when encountering a firearm. The State Board of Education would be required to establish curriculum guidelines for a standardized firearm safety program. And the guidelines would include accident prevention for students enrolled in kindergarten through grades 1 through 5. The curriculum would be based on the Eddie Eagle Gun Safe program offered by the National Rifle Association. For grades 6 through 8, the curriculum would be based on the Eddie Eagle Gun Safe program or the Hunter Education in Our Schools program offered by the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks. For grades 9 through 12, it would be Hunter Education in Our Schools program If a local board elects to provide firearm safety, the instruction will be required in accordance with these guidelines. This bill has been around before. It was actually passed by the legislature in 2023. The governor vetoed it, and there was an effort to override the veto, and it failed by one vote in the House. So that's the bill.
Thank you, Mike. Committee, any questions for Mike? Representative Miller?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mike, has anything changed from this version of the bill from the 2023 version that almost passed through the House?
I'm not sure I understood the question.
Is it pretty much the exact same thing that we saw?
It's pretty much the same.
Okay, thank you, sir.
It may be a few words different, but I think it's about the same.
Representative Mosley?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Would parents be able to opt out of this education program?
Again, I got new hearing aids and I'm.
Oh, would parents be able to opt out of this program?
It's up to the school district whether or not they do it. If they do it, then they've got to follow these guidelines. So there's no
So parents will be
requirement.
compelled if the school district, so if the school district chooses to take on this program, parents will be compelled to put their children through it?
My understanding is that if they decide to do it, the instruction will be required to be in accordance with this bill. You bet.
Committee, are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mike. First up on the proponent list is going to be Representative Patrick Penn. Representative, welcome back to committee.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for having me. Madam Vice, Mr. Rankin, and committee members, thank you all so much for having us in here. Let's see, I think this will be time number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 that I've appeared before this committee carrying this particular bill. And it's always a pleasure to be before House, Fed, and State. So thank you for your time. I know it's precious, so I'll get on with it. You have my testimony in your file. I'll read from it very briefly. Mr. Chairman, honorable members of the committee, I support House Bill now 2104. I'm a firm believer in the right to bear arms, but I also believe that there needs to be a component of education added as well. Education is a must when it pertains to our children. As you proceed today, please take into account that, in fact, one day it may be your child or your grandchildren that come across a gun in a public or private space. And with this particular training, it can prevent the pain that so many have endured. Let's protect our children and add this education component. The language of House Bill 2104 is plain in its intent, in its idea, and its price tag. When the bill was introduced in the 2018 session, ladies and gentlemen, the estimated cost to implement these curriculum guidelines was a mere $2,500. That number comes from the fiscal note on House Bill 2460, as it was heard in House, Fed, and State Committee that year. Some of you were actually here at that time. According to the records that I've reviewed, it does not appear that the Department of Education submitted testimony on this bill for that hearing. 2021, let's fast forward, when this bill ran as substitute House Bill 2089, the fiscal note on it remained at a minimal impact of a mere $2,500 to cover the cost of travel and to incorporate the program and deliver the necessary materials, coloring books, put a guy in a costume, talk to some kids, maybe some online training, vignettes and video. In 2022, the bill was reintroduced as Senate Bill 522. And then the Department of Education came out in vocal opposition to the bill, and the department also, through Mr. Profit, raised the estimate of the cost to implement this of the simple bill, excuse me, of the simple bill from $2,500 to $70,000. This curious anomaly remained the case when the bill ran previously as House Bill 2304. So, why do I say all that? I would recommend that this committee please ask the question, what changed in the Department of Education's interpretation of the bill to require the expenditure of $67,500 $500 of taxpayers' money to their estimate from one year to the next. If the Department of Education interprets the bill to require or even allow them to rewrite the standards dictated by the bill, then I think they need to clarify that, or we need to clarify the legislative intent. If they could create any standards on firearm safety that they wanted under this bill, just like they can today, they still have that power, then there'd be no reason for those of us who have been working on this bill for years to push this legislation, and the opposition would be completely unfounded. I'm not sure why there's opposition. I would imagine that it has to do with 3 letters. So, through this bill, the NRA, there's your 3 letters, is providing its gold standard programming for firearm safety training for our Kansas kids and saving lives at no cost and negligible impact to our state budget. In addition, the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks program, the hunter safety education in our schools, that was developed with great care, would become the standard for higher grade levels. I would encourage this committee to delve deeper into the department's interpretation of the legislation's plain language and plain intent, as well as how it arrives at a higher price tag that was recently tacked onto the bill to wave people off in 2021. Now, all that said, Mr. Chairman, I would ask us now to come together with our own strength to promote and ensure that our Kansas children are properly educated in grade-appropriate fashion on firearm accident prevention and how to practice gun safety in accordance with our Kansas law. You'll see in my testimony there are a couple of links, 1 and 2. These 2 new links, right, they show how this legislation, as plainly written, plainly intended, is urgently needed to help to whatever extent possible prevent tragedies such as what happened to a 4-year-old named Michaela McKay when she came across a firearm inside her home, and 13-year-old Adam Toledo, who found a firearm about 3 a.m. outside from occurring here in Kansas with our children. Our fight now is to protect any other parent from experiencing the pain of losing a child due to a lack of training on the appropriate reaction when encountering a firearm. This legislation will help achieve that goal while leaving the final decision over whether to teach firearm safety up to each individual school board. This language has previously enjoyed overwhelming bipartisan support. It even made it to the governor's desk a couple of times. And in conversation with the governor when we went in for our Black Legislative Conference, she did tell me that she knows that it's not a mandate. That was a past argument as well. So I asked her if she would please tell her caucus the same. It's previously enjoyed overwhelming bipartisan support and has passed favorably out of both the House and the Senate in past years. I urge you to now join and vote when you work this bill, yes, to pass out House Bill 2104. And thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Representative. I think we'll go ahead and have everybody kind of speak, then we'll ask questions at the end. Do you have a committee meeting you need to get to?
I do, and we have-
Okay, so
we
we'll go ahead
have
and take
action.
questions for you right now.
Thank you, sir.
So,
Thank you.
Representative Clayton?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here, Representative. So as I read the bill, it seems like this would only be for public school curriculum?
Well, the Department of Education oversees the public school curriculum.
Would you be, it's my understanding that the reason why you brought this is because you have concern for the safety of Kansas children. But not all Kansas children attend public schools. Some of them attend private schools, charter schools, some of them are home schools. Would you accept an amendment that would compel our private, charter, and homeschool families to use this curriculum as well, thus keeping all Kansas kids safe regardless of where they're educated?
I think that all of those individuals, I've not talked with those types of schools, but I would imagine that with their instruction that they have, they don't need any particular type of legislation to tell them they champion their gun safety and teaching that to their kids already. I know I do.
Every single
mine.
private school you know does that
like I said, I've not
without
talked to them.
equivocation?
I just said, I've not talked to them, so I don't know about every single. If you've talked to every single, please let me know. And if once you have an amendment and you've talked to every single, come to me with it.
Okay, I will bring an amendment that makes sure that all Kansas kids are compelled regardless of where.
But it has to go to
Because if that
every
is the
single-
intent behind this,
Yeah.
Right now, to me, this does not look like an issue of genuinely caring about students and children and gun safety. If we did that, we would put in a safe storage law. Instead, to me, this looks like something where we are just trying to compel public schools to follow a curriculum. And so the logic is somewhat skewed. If we care about all kids, it needs to be all kids, regardless of where they're educated. And I'll work on that amendment, and I look forward to your support.
Okay. And Mr. Chairman, Representative, I would ask that by your standard, that we have the documentation that you've talked to every public school, every school that you just listed, should you bring such an amendment? Because I'd be willing to entertain that, but only on those points that you've already raised. Thank you.
Representative Haskins.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and obviously, and thank you, colleague, for your testimony. Obviously, you know, you've gone to bat for this curriculum a few times, and having worked at the Kansas State Department of Ed, traditionally curriculum being proposed would go to them, get it vetted, and then they make the recommendations to the public schools. Did you go through that process, and if so, what was the results?
Well, that was a part of the testimony. Thank you for the question, Representative. Mr. Chairman. That was part of the testimony. Excuse me. You say the Department of Education, correct?
Yeah, the Kansas State Department of Ed.
Yeah, the Kansas Department of State of Education has seen this bill since 2018. They've testified on it a couple of times. They've seen it all, and to answer your question, yes, they've vetted this as well. They have their response or their non-response, so you have that in your testimony as well.
And one follow-up on that, just to be clear, you haven't gone with the curriculum to the Kansas State Department of Ed, spoken with the education consultant and say, please consider this and have the board adopt this as curriculum. The only reference is the bill.
Yes, that is the intent of the legislative, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, yes, that is the intent of the legislation. I would think it would be foolhardy to go to the Department of Education or the state school board with curriculum that has not been developed or approved, because if you read the plain language, as I said before, of the bill, it doesn't state that we are compelling them to do at the local level a curriculum. They are supposed to, we are empowering the state and directing them to have one on the shelf that they decide. That comes off the shelf when the local school board requests it. Going back to the representative's question that was asked of the reviser, it's not compelling all students in a school to take any curriculum. Think of it as a club or something that you sign up for. There's not an option to opt in or opt out. To opt out, because there's nothing to opt into, or being compelled that you must opt out of, I should say. The concept is, if a parent wants their child to receive this education, the state has to have a standard at the ready that's uniform across the state. So if my school board on 259 decides that, or a parent comes to 259 and says, hey, I would like for my kid to have this education, then they appeal that and all the way up to their state school board. They take that particular piece of curriculum and they deliver it down to whoever wants to opt into it. It's not about forcing it down and having an opt-out. That was one of the wrangles that we had before, over the years, local control, and making sure that they weren't not mandated to do anything.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your answer.
Thank you.
Representative Mosley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative, I don't want to make an assumption, but you have school-aged children, I'm guessing.
I do.
Do they go to public school?
They do not.
Have you pushed this program into your children's school? Does your children's school have this club?
Like I said, I think that at my children's school, I don't know how that's pertinent to this particular conversation, but if you must know, I teach my kids this stuff already.
It just seems like you're very passionate about safety for children. So, so you haven't started with your own children's school?
Actually, let me help you. Here's why I'm passionate about this bill. Here's why I'm passionate about this bill. When I was first elected to the legislature back in 2020, the individual that I ran against had a forum downtown Wichita, Kansas. Had a nice lady approach me after that forum. She monitored the campaign, and when we won, she approached me in February of that 2021. She reached out to me because she had a situation. Some of you were here, so you remember this whole piece, how the bill was originally written the first time that we ran it. They had a situation whereby her child, and she was not one of my constituents, she was not from my party, So it has nothing to do with public, private, party, race, creed, gender, anything like that. Her son suffered at the hands of a firearm. She wanted to get legislation passed that would address it. The legislation or the action that she wanted to receive, I think Representative Clayton brought it up earlier, a gun safe, which they don't have that ability to legislate at the local level. She wanted that. That was not possible. We talked with her, and this is what she supported at that time, which would be education. Those are her words that I read into the record here, to train children on it. So, to answer your question, my children, your children, public schools, private schools, it matters not to me. I think that everyone should know 4 simple principles: stop, don't touch, run away, tell a grown-up.
Go ahead, Representative.
So why is this education more time sensitive than passing like safe storage or pushing a safe storage policy in the state?
This bill does not address safe storage, so I wouldn't know the answer to that.
Thank you.
Representative James?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a lot of us rural kids and our kids often go to hunter safety courses. So many kids don't hunt. So is this just another way for an offering for kids to learn about safety in schools if they want to, as just a extracurricular activity or whatever you want to call it?
Mr. Chairman, Representative, that is correct. 100% correct.
Representative Byers?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for being here today, Representative. Is there anything that currently prevents like an outside club like scouting or something like that from doing Eddie Eagles? So it would, I mean, you said it's similar to a club. It wouldn't be mandated, it wouldn't be required. So is there anything currently preventing clubs associated with schools, either private or public or homeschools, from providing this type of education, Eddie Eagles specifically, to their club members?
I am not familiar with any of the clubs or any of the policy, rather, that would be preventative of that. I'm not sure. I don't know the answer to that question, but I've not seen anything in any of the, I've sat on the K-12 education budget my first 2 years. We've kept tabs on this bill, as I've said, over 5 years. That's never been an issue that anyone has ever raised.
Yeah, because from what I understand, clubs operate independently of the school. They're just allowed to operate within the school. I was a den mom and a committee chair and all that stuff for years for scouting. And, you know, we didn't really necessarily have to have any of our education or anything pass through the school board to make sure that it did whatever. It was independently operating. So we did offer, you know, gun safety courses and things of that nature, of course, off of campus. But we did discuss it in some of our meetings, and it doesn't seem to me like we would need legislation of this sort, you know, really potentially, you know, influencing or mandating. And I understand that you're saying it's not a mandate, but, you know, school districts can do what they wish. It doesn't seem like this would be necessary if clubs are already able to use this type of gun safety education if they choose. So that was just really where I'm going with this question. It doesn't seem like it would be necessary to legislate particularly. So thank you.
Thank you for that comment, Mr. Chairman, Representative. When I was young, I was raised in foster care, and we didn't have a lot of money or a lot of opportunity to make it to Cub Scouts, We Below, any of that type of stuff. And so I think that there are many individuals who look like me that don't have the opportunity to, or the finance to go to all of those clubs and be a part of it. And what this bill would actually do is basically unify us better by stabilizing it across the board. regardless of the socioeconomic strata, to have the access to receive this training if it's not already, if you don't have access to those types of extracurricular clubs or those opportunities. So the delivery system is where we all come together, we all pay taxes, so I think it's a good bill.
Thank you, Representative. So just to follow up on that, I would like to be clear. Maybe you don't know my background, but my children were at a Title I school, very low-income individuals, many foster children, children from very diverse backgrounds, one of the poorest schools in the Johnson County area. And we did offer these clubs free of charge because we were able to collect contributions from other troops in the area, in the entire, scouting organization to support our low-income youth. So while I'm sorry that you were not able to access it, I wanted to just be clear that these programs are regularly accessible by low-income youth, and I very specifically work with low-income youth as a low-income mother. Thank you.
Fantastic. And Mr. Chairman, I would only say, and I know we're not in debate or anything like that, but going back to the earlier representative's question, have we checked with every school across the state on every echelon? Have we checked with every Cub Scout troop across the state on every echelon? Do they all do that particular piece of consolidation and delivery of that training? I'll be interested to see if that happens in western Kansas, eastern Kansas, outside of Joco, Kansas.
So Representative, I know you have another committee waiting on you, so we're going to take one more question here for you and let you get out of here. And I was kind of,
Mr. Chairman, I got all day.
I was kind of dreading this day with my pronunciations, but I'm going for it anyway. Representative Schwertfeger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Penn, thank you for you bringing this bill. It's a good bill. We should pass it.
Mr. Chairman, Kev, thanks, brother.
Thank you for your testimony, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Next up, we have Tammy Bartles. Welcome to committee.
Hello again. My name is Tammy Bartles, and Mr. Chairman and the committee, thank you for giving me the opportunity again to speak before you. I speak in favor of House Bill 2104. I stand before you not only as the Kansas State Director of Women for Gun Rights, but I am also a mother and a grandmother to Stinson, who is 3, and Mac, who will be 1 in 9 days. I am a longtime public school advocate. I have stood before this body many times during my tenure as the president of the Kansas Parent Teacher Association, and I am a firearms trainer, certified by the state of Kansas to teach several classes. I know the value of education in general and safety education in particular. I have taught gun safety classes to youth and their parents, including information on what to do if a friend brings a gun to school. We talk about who to go to and the dangers of handling a firearm without a trusted adult present. We review safety and teach both the parents and youth how a gun works. These classes help remove the mysticism of guns and have helped the students be better prepared and safer if they are presented with an unsecured firearm. I also have advocated for public education for many years as the president of Kansas Parent Teacher Association. I believe that knowledge and education are the greatest gifts we can give children. While my children are grown and my grandchildren are not quite school-aged yet, my daughter is an administrator at an area high school. I am still passionate about advocating for public education, and I believe that this bill will help make schools in our communities safer by ensuring that the education, if offered, is standardized. And no disrespect to anyone, but I think we've gotten a little off topic here. What this bill is designed to do is direct the Department of Education to establish standards for firearm safety education so that schools that choose to offer firearm safety education are all offering the same thing. And I have been to this circus a couple of times, and I am aware that there are people on this committee and past members of this committee who have expressed concern that this program, the Eddie Eagle program, is designed by the National Rifle Association, and they are concerned about the appearance that it may give. But I stand before you to say the National Rifle Association was formed over 150 years ago with the primary purpose of educating people on safe marksmanship and gun safety. I have served on a Department of Education committee, standards committee, more than one time. During those on those committees, we had experts in the field being discussed. In particular, I served on the Special Education Committee. Our committee was made up of special education teachers, and I was on there representing parents as well as a certified educational advocate for the state of Kansas. Why would you not want people who have dedicated their entire life to teaching people about gun safety be involved in the development of a curriculum to do just that, teach gun safety? We go to experts on other things. Why do we not want experts helping educate our children? We teach kids to stop, drop, and roll. We partner with local law enforcement departments to teach DARE. We talk about stranger danger and so many other things to help keep them safe. One argument I have heard in this committee previously is that, well, it doesn't always work. Well, kids who take DARE still grow up and use drugs, and unfortunately, people still die in fires. People who are wearing their seatbelts still die in car wrecks. That doesn't mean we don't do things to help make them as safe as possible. As an educator, I strongly encourage you to vote yes on House Bill 2104 and help our children be equally equipped to protect themselves and keep themselves safe. Thank you.
Committee, any questions? Representative Clayton.
Thank you, and thank you for being here today. I definitely support this type of education for our students, but a question that I have is that, so this bill compels the Department of Education to set this curriculum, but it's my understanding that the State Board of Education already has those guidelines. Our State Board of Education is a very conservative body that I know supports this. Why does the legislature need to compel the Department of Education to do this when the state board, who is really more of a curriculum setting body, already does it? Seems a little redundant to me, and I'm just trying to figure that out, because again, the state board, way conservative, they would like this. Have you thought about bringing this to them?
So I have not been involved in that process. I am just here to speak to this bill specifically. I don't know what the process, I am no longer involved at that level, and so I do not know what has been brought to the State Board of Education prior to this.
Committee, any other questions? Not seeing any. Thank you, Tammy.
Thank you.
Next up, Mariah Day. Welcome back to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Good to see you all again, 2 days in a row. On behalf of the American firearm industry, I request that you support House Bill 2104, legislation that promises to provide essential firearm safety education to young Kansans.
Mariah, sorry, I'm going to stop you there. Please state your name for the record.
Sorry about that. Mariah Day with NSSF, the Firearm Industry Trade Association. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Back to my testimony. I'll try to keep this brief. You all have my written testimony. We would like to encourage you to support this legislation. NSSF estimates that there are over 26.2 million new first-time gun owners in America since 2020. That's a very large number, obviously, more than the population of Florida. New firearm owners today are more and more representative of the population as a whole. It's no accident that our state and the country as a whole have experienced record low numbers of accidental firearm-related deaths in recent years, all while the numbers of firearm owners and civilian-owned firearms have never been greater. I'm talking about actual numbers, not just rates, which are frequently discussed. According to data from the CDC, firearms are involved in 0.2% of all unintentional fatalities across all ages and 1.9% of all unintentional fatalities among children. While numbers obviously fluctuate a little year to year, From 1991 to 2021, firearm-related accidental fatalities have decreased 61%. For an apples-to-apples comparison, firearm production in the U.S. during that time period increased 407.5%. We are, of course, aiming for 0 accidental firearm fatalities, and we've made great progress since the establishment of initiatives like Project Child Safe, the Eddie Eagle Firearm Safety Program, and others. This point simply cannot be stressed enough, though. The modern record of firearm safety is truly extraordinary, and that's come with a lot of hard work. Americans are safer with their firearms than any other common, potentially dangerous possessions in the home. Gun owners deserve immense praise, not scorn. However, safety education efforts must continue and grow, especially with millions of new individuals purchasing firearms for the first time. They cannot be suppressed and discouraged due to the political agendas of the most radical elements of our society. I encourage you to do as much as possible to provide voluntary firearm safety education, especially to vulnerable young people. I'd like to very briefly address a couple of the questions that were asked earlier and be happy to expound on them more if needed. I would like to point out that a member of the Board of Education, I think it was a couple years ago, when debate was happening on the floor on this same bill, essentially, a member of the Board of Education at the time made the statement to another individual for others to overhear that this would be implemented over their dead body. I think that represents the type of opposition that some individuals have dedicated to this bill, and describes, I think, the reason why some of the proponents for the bill over the years may have chosen not to have in-depth conversations with the Board of Education, considering that, regardless of any changes or proposed changes to the language, they weren't going to make any headway on those levels. Another issue I'd like to mention very briefly, I'm personally not aware of any curriculum that the state sets specific standards for private or homeschools. I'd be happy to look into that more, but I did want to address the question that was asked earlier. I'm not personally aware of any on any topic, but I'd love to delve into that a little bit more and figure out if that's the case, so we can discuss that in greater detail. Finally, I'd just like to mention that a standardized curriculum will encourage more schools to implement this type of training where there isn't already an active club or association pushing for it. I think this bill provides an opportunity for the state to set specific standards that the Board of Education can push out to local school districts, and then leaves the final decision in the hands of those local school districts, those local school Board of Education, to make the decision as to whether they implement this type of curriculum and offer it as an opportunity. You'll see in the bill that the phrase, I believe it's one of the last lines in the bill, talks about providing this as an opportunity, for students, making it available. I want to address the issue of whether parents would be able to opt out of this. I believe there are, in most circumstances, maybe all circumstances with curriculum, parents have the ability to opt their child out of a certain topic like this. And so my understanding, and I believe the intention with this bill, while I'm not the not the drafter of the language or any of that, I believe the intention is to allow parents the opportunity to opt their kids out of it, just like they'd be able to with other subjects. With that, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you. We'll actually take questions here at the end. We got one more coming up here. Next up is Megan Hilbish. Is that right? Welcome back to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chairman, committee members, good morning. Again, my name is Megan Hilbish. I'm the Executive Director of the Kansas State Rifle Association, which is a nonprofit, and we are a firm believer in your Second Amendment rights, and also that education is key. Like how Tammy spoke about, the Women for Gun Rights, education is very important. In my opinion, no matter what subject it's about, whether we're talking about firearms here or whatever it is, especially for our future generations. So our young children that are very impressionable and that their parents may or may not want to have their children's learning about firearms in public schools, but we firmly believe that these programs, that's as described in House Bill 2104, are evidence-based, well-researched, well-founded, and rooted in very good curriculum. You should all have 2 pamphlets, and I would encourage every single one of you to please read every word of both of those pamphlets and to make a decision for yourself how your constituents would feel about having this curriculum in public schools throughout the state of Kansas. This bill does not require it. This bill makes it an opportunity. It makes it possible. It does not force kids or their parents or school districts or specific schools, teachers, administrators, principals, school district board members, the Board of Education, at the state level either, to have to do this. It just makes it possible. I've personally actually taught the Eddie Eagle Gun Safe program in an elementary school in Emporia, Kansas. It was Timmerman Elementary School about 10, 15 years ago to a group of young children who many had probably never heard firearm safety before. And this is why I think it is so important, is because I have personally seen learning basic firearm safety that any person, no matter what age, honestly should know, that especially these young kids that don't know any better, that they got the opportunity by my instruction to learn some basic firearm safety. And these 4 tenets of the Eddie Eagle Gun Safe program, which are stop, don't touch, run away, and tell a grown-up. Those are pretty simple, catchy little phrases. Kids can memorize them very quickly, especially if you listen to I would encourage you all to listen to the YouTube videos of Eddie Eagle, the Eddie Eagle. Kids love him. Most kids love Eddie Eagle. I'm personally a fan, but I am not here on behalf of the National Rifle Association. So please keep in mind that I am here representing the Kansas State Rifle Association and 3,000 plus members who also feel the same, that we do need this Eddie Eagle Gun Safe program or other similar programs that are evidence-based, educational, that are not trying to skew the minds of young children. We are simply just trying to provide the fundamental groundwork, framework of basic firearm safety education here. And we're not trying to force the Board of Education to do this. We're just trying to make it allowed. Because say, for example, in Emporia, USD 253, so the school district itself is very liberal. And if today I said, hey, I want to go back to Timmerman Elementary School and I want to teach that Eddie Eagle program again, I would probably have some buff on that. I don't know, honestly. I probably will ask to find out if they would let me do it again. But I'd probably have to have school district board approval first, and whatever their process is. Anyways, I just think that this bill, the way it is written this year, is definitely worth supporting and passing. Also, the Kansas Hunter education pamphlets that I provided, I'm a Kansas Hunter Education Certified Instructor as well. You know, hunter education is geared towards you have to be 11 years old now in the state of Kansas or older. I took hunter safety at 7 years old and passed it on my first time. Not many 7-year-olds back then could do that, but nowadays with 11-year-olds, sometimes it's hard for them to pass hunter education. And honestly, this is not a hunter education full-on course. It is not a traditional hunter ed. It's not a hybrid or an internet-assisted hunter education course. If you look in those pamphlets, their main principles of firearm safety are pretty self-explanatory, but they're geared towards children, well, not just children, any person over the age of 11 years old or older. So I think that this is great that in this bill, it specifically states kindergarten through 5th grade shall be the Eddie Eagle Gun Safe program offered by the National Rifle Association or any successor program. For 6th through 8th grade, that would be like a combination of the Eddie Eagle program and the hunter education firearm safety curriculum. Then for high school age, so 9th through 12th grade, would be strictly, or not strictly, excuse me, it would not be the Eddie Eagle program. It would allow, again, not required. We're not forcing parents to make their kids learn firearm safety. That's your personal choice if you don't want your kid to learn basic firearm safety. But for 9th through 12th graders who can make a lot of decisions on their own, that we think that the Kansas Hunter Education based firearm safety curriculum is more age appropriate. Again, I'd just like to stress that these principles are essential for anyone to know, especially maybe your own children. And I would encourage you to watch the YouTube videos of Eddie Eagle, read those pamphlets, learn more about what this curriculum actually does, what it actually is, not just whatever your personal views might be of the NRA or Eddie Eagle. And again, on behalf of KSRA, we urge the committee to act swiftly to approve House Bill 2104 and to send it to the full legislature for consideration. Thank you for your time today and attention to this important matter. I am glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, committee, we're going to go ahead and jump into questions here. Does anybody have any questions for Tammy, Mariah, or Megan? Representative Reese.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate this has been, I think, since it was brought to committee years ago, I was sitting on this committee. But my question is for you or the other conferees, proponents. You know, our children are most prone for gun violence in schools. Would you feel that an appropriate active shooter training go along with this program?
Mr. Chair, could you please?
Yes, would you feel that active shooter training for kids go along with this program in schools, since our kids are most prone for violence in schools, gun violence?
Personally, I don't feel like, I don't have any school-age children that are in Kansas public schools, and I can't speak on behalf of the Board of Education. I can only speak on behalf of the Kansas State Rifle Association.
Gentlemen, can you reply to that, please? About active shooter training go along with Eddie Eagle?
Mr. Chair, yes, thank you for the question. I believe as far as this specific bill is concerned, our position is to keep this bill clean and just focus on this one topic like it has been, you know, all these years. Like you said, you've been, you know, on this committee for a long time. Appreciate always seeing you and hearing your comments and questions. Personally, you know, and on behalf of the NSSF, safety for our students is of the highest priority. Personally, I would love to see active shooter training taught in schools more than it already is. You know, it already is, I believe, taught in a number of schools to varying levels. But, you know, absolutely, our kids need to learn that just like they learn fire safety, just like they learn stranger danger, just like they learn pool safety. You know, there's numerous issues that kids need to learn, you know, safety related to.
And the reason I'm asking that, because you're talking about safety in schools, I'm talking about safety in schools with this type of training as well. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Representative Mosley.
May I say something real quick to that last question?
Go ahead.
Okay. I do believe that while active shooter training is a separate issue, this bill could help reduce active shooter incidents because a child will know what to do if a friend brings a gun to school. They will be empowered to go find an adult and tell them about it.
Representative Mosley?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm so sorry, I am drawing a blank on your name. Yes, you. I know I've seen you like 3 times. My grandparents, my grandmother is from the Missouri part of Missouri, and so I grew up in a household, at least going to my grandparents' house where there were weapons and there were like shotguns and handguns, and I'm also trained on multiple weapons. I am a gun owner myself. And so my question is part of the Eddie Eagle training talking about safe storage at all, since safety seems to be very much a concern?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for that excellent question, Representative Mosley. So I don't have the full Eddie Eagle program curriculum memorized. I mean, again, this was 10, 15 years ago, but from my understanding, from what I do recall, that there is something mentioned within it about, say, you stop, don't touch, run away, go tell a grown-up, but sometimes maybe they can't run away. Maybe they can't go tell a grown-up or an adult. So there is a portion in that curriculum that does address if you already have it in your hands or pressed against your body or pointed at you, or you come across it in your own home. And maybe it's one you're not afraid of. Maybe it's one you're not gonna run away from. And maybe it's one that you already know how to disarm or unload it yourself and make it safe, or maybe it's their own the child's personal firearm or firearm that their parents let them use. And so I think there is a portion in that curriculum that talks about how to ethically or properly, say safely, store firearms.
So there's, to your knowledge, you don't know if there is like a part of the it's like, for instance, my friend's child stayed at my home over Christmas. I drove her to the airport I guess over the summer, actually, I drove her to the airport. I have a handgun that's in my bedroom because I live alone. And I gave her the option to either sleep downstairs or sleep upstairs in my room. And so when she said she wanted to sleep upstairs in my room and I was sleeping downstairs, I actually unloaded my weapon. I put a lock on it, and then I actually put it in a lockbox, and I stored it very high so she would not have access to it. And so there's nothing that kind of educates children on if you see a gun and it's like kind of just willy-nilly, to kind of explain that to their parents, like how that's going to keep them safe, to your knowledge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you again, Representative Mosley, for that good question. I think a different there's a lot of different firearm safety education programs, whether that's relating to storing, locking, using a lock, or using some other kind of mechanism that requires the firearm to be unloaded and locked and stored, say inside of a safe or some other kind of device, where there's multiple mechanisms to be able to actually use it for self-protection. That's a personal choice on how you want to store your own firearms in your own home. I'm not advocating for any particular way of safely storing firearms here. If there is a program that exists that talks more specifically about how to ethically and safely store firearms in their own home, I will do more research, and I'd be glad to get back with you or discuss that more with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Haskins?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And is Mr. Day? Thank you for your testimony and reading it. The testimony, you added something in your oral testimony, and can you go clear it up a little bit? You said a few years ago, the Kansas State School Board, the state heard this curriculum, and somebody said it won't pass over my dead body. When was that? So did you go through the process of getting the curriculum adopted? Is this, and what was the result other than that colorful comment?
Thank you for that question, Representative. Appreciate that. To clarify, and I'm sorry if I wasn't clear before, the situation was this body passed this bill. It passed through the committee process, went to the floor for a floor debate and vote everything on general orders. During debate, I believe it was on the House floor a couple years ago, an individual who was on the State Board of Education made the comment in the gallery loudly enough for those sitting around to overhear that this would not be implemented over their dead body was the statement. And I've double checked with others who were present and overheard that. I don't want to go into greater detail, but obviously that's an anecdotal thing. But that's the situation is during debate on the House floor.
And I appreciate you clarifying that. And even though open comments in the gallery are not recorded, but let's just say that that's the case. They're an appointed body, and so they get elected. There's a staff at the Kansas State Department of Ed that handles this by constitutional Article 6. That's their responsibility as independent. And it seems like we're just wanting to bypass this process because we know what the answer is going to be, but yet the state has a process. So I'm just trying to get cleared. Did any of these curriculum suggestions at Eagle, anything, have they gone to the Kansas State Department of Ed and have a discussion about this topic?
Yeah, great question. Appreciate your follow-up on that. As far as I'm aware, I don't believe those conversations have happened at the Department of Ed. Obviously, they would be able to speak to that more clearly, and then obviously Representative Penn, who unfortunately wasn't able to stay, would be able to talk about that as well since he carried the bill, as well as his predecessor who carried the bill, Representative Whitmer from the Wichita area. I know there were a lot of discussions offline, but I'm not aware of any formal discussions or presentations to the State Board of Education on this.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Body, any more questions? Representative Osman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. If I could ask for the Kansas State Rifle Association representative. Thank you very much for your testimony. We have pamphlets here that have been passed out. One is from the Kansas Department of Wildlife, Parks. And I wanted to find out, so they do hunter education. Is there a reason that it's not listed in the bill that they might be able to do education for the kindergarten through fifth graders, and it's the Eddie Eagle program?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the question, Representative Osman. Check. Okay. So my understanding, I am a Kansas Hunter Education instructor, right? As well as the executive director of the Kansas State Rifle Association. So the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks is in charge of the Kansas Hunter Education program. The curriculum that's talked about in this specific bill is a portion of what is taught in a normal, traditional Kansas Hunter Education class. There's a specific Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks Hunter Education manual that every student is given when they are in person for the in-person instruction, or it's available online too if you do the internet assisted or hybrid class. So I'm not sure if I answered your question or if maybe.
To a degree. Let me ask a different question. You work for the, or represent the Kansas State Rifle Association, correct? Is that the same as the National Rifle Association?
Mr. Chair, thank you for that question, and I'd be glad to clarify that. So no, the Kansas State Rifle Association, we are a nonprofit organization that is a 501c4 in the state of Kansas. We also have the Kansas State Rifle Association PAC, Political Action Committee, so I'm technically also a lobbyist for the KSRA. And then also we have the KSRA Foundation, which is a 501c3. But in particular, in regards to the National Rifle Association, or the NRA, I am not a representative of the National Rifle Association. I'm not a representative of the Eddie Eagle Gun Safe program, but I can say, like personally, I am a life member of the NRA and a life member of the Kansas State Rifle Association, and also that KSRA is recognized as the state affiliate state association for the National Rifle Association.
So I'm trying to understand though, if the Kansas State Rifle Association were to come in to teach gun safety under the Eddie Eagle program, that would be in violation of this bill as it's written.
Mr. Chair, if the National Rifle Association themselves,
No, if the Kansas State Rifle Association came in to
if
teach
the
Eddie
Kansas
Eagle
State
program.
Rifle Association, say myself,
Yes.
if I tried to teach Eddie Eagle in an elementary school, in a public elementary school in the state of Kansas,
Yes.
as to my knowledge, it's allowed and still happening. If I wanted to do that myself, I think I can.
Under this bill, because the bill itself specifies only the National Rifle Association.
No, that's not my understanding. Sorry, Mr. Chair, Mr. Representative.
All right. One last question. You had mentioned in one of your responses to another representative that there are, as we talked about safe storage, there are many safety programs out there. If there are many safety programs out there, what is the rationale for only mandating the Eddie Eagle program through the National Rifle Association rather than any safe education program for kids?
Mr. Chair, and thank you again, Representative Osmond, for a great question. On behalf of KSRA, we support that the Eddie Eagle is a great program for young children, kindergarten through 5th grade. If there are other, there are other firearm safety education programs that have been taught in the state of Kansas. I can't say for certain that they've been taught inside of Kansas public schools or elementary schools, but I do see the validity or the need, the importance of the Eddie Eagle program itself. I'm not speaking on anything on behalf of, in regards to the NRA or National Rifle Association, but the Eddie Eagle program specifically, I think, does a good job of the words that's used, the catchy phrases, the songs and the dances, and the YouTube videos will explain part of the curriculum that is taught. And to clarify, an Eddie Eagle program is not a club. It is a one day, usually, at least when I taught it, it was a after school, I gotta use the cafeteria and the gym of the Timmerman Elementary School. And I was, I think, in middle school or high school at the time. And I've already had some certifications under my belt, and I've been a competitive shooter since I was 7 years old. But I was able to teach the Eddie Eagle program. I wasn't a teacher at that school. It doesn't have to be a teacher at that school. It also doesn't have to be necessarily inside of the cafeteria or the gym, but it was basically an after-school class for a one-day thing.
All right. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Representative McNorton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is for revisor. So in line, or section 1, kindergarten and grades through 1 through 5 shall be eligible, or shall be the Eddie Eagle Gun Safe Program offered by the NRA. So does that mean the NRA is the only one that can teach that, or it's just a program the NRA's put together and they'll have qualified teachers that can use that program? To try to answer the question that my previous rep had.
Well, I believe it requires it says shall be the Eddie Eagle Gun Safe Program offered by the NRA or any successor program. It's, I'm not, I don't know if it would require that the NRA, a member, provide the instruction, if that's your question, but that's the program that would be required for kindergarten at 1 through 5.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Not seeing any other questions. Thank you for your testimonies. I would like to point out we do have several written testimonies as well. And I don't have any neutral in person, but we do have one neutral written that would be in your packet as well. We're going to move on to the opponents here in oral testimony. We have Ann Ma. Ann, welcome to committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's a pleasure to be here. Hopefully I can clear up a lot of stuff that's been talked about the last half hour or so. My name is Ann Ma. I was here a couple years ago representing as the liaison for the State Board of Education. I am now retired from that job, and today I guess I'm just representing grannies who love the state constitution and guns. First, let me say, I have no problem with firearms safety education. My uncle was killed in a hunting accident when he was only 16. The more education, the better. And I'm not opposed to guns. I come from a family with a long history of sport hunting. As a state representative, I voted for concealed carry, stand and defend, the castle doctrine, all that stuff. I have no problem with guns. My dad, a lifetime member of the NRA, I guarantee you, practiced concealed carry decades before it was legal. And I even voted to override Governor Sebelius's veto of concealed carry. I'm all for the Second Amendment. What I have a problem with is this legislative overreach into the authority of the State Board of Education and local school districts in Kansas. The Kansas Constitution and the Kansas Supreme Court have given full authority over curricular standards to the State Board of Education. Let me repeat, and it's a long case history. The Kansas Constitution and the Kansas Supreme Court have given full authority over curricular standards to the State Board of Education. This is not a legislative matter. And even if it became law, the State Board of Education would be welcome to say, thanks, but no thanks. Because schools do not need your permission to provide gun safety classes. They already do it. They do not need your guidance. Local districts are quite capable of choosing the program they want locally without legislative interference, without this government overreach. In fact, a 2023 survey that the State Board of Education did showed that 44 districts already offer gun safety education, most of them using the Wildlife and Parks program. Interestingly, there is nothing in this bill that would provide more firearm safety training to any other students, nothing. If the school's not already offering it, there's nothing here to encourage them to do it. If you really want more students to have access to firearm safety education, then fund it, because by the state constitution, that is your job. But the biggest reason to reject this bill is the State Board of Education already established a standard on firearm safety education. If you remember, and whoever folks who are here, back in 2018, firearm safety education was a part of the Safe and Secure Schools Act. It was a standard. In my testimony, you will find the language from that bill. The State Board of Education adopted that language and included it in the Safe and Secure Schools program on its website. It allows the Eddie Eagle program, the Wildlife and Parks program, or any other evidence-based program, which is more flexible than this bill. It allows the maximum flexibility for schools to do what they think is right for their local communities. So if you think this bill had been here 5 times, somebody might have gone out to look to see if it was even needed, if this was already covered, because it's already covered. But even though the law has changed and firearm safety was dropped from your Safe and Secure Schools law, the State Board kept that standard, and it's on their website today. While it is true that the legislature may write laws about education policy, case law has said that those laws must be in harmony with KSBOE policies. This bill clearly tries to supersede the State Board and actually restricts firearm safety education options that schools have today. Do you really want to be the one that has to go home and tell your local district they have to change their firearm safety program because the legislature is smarter than they are? I'd really like to hear that conversation. So to sum it up, this bill would not provide firearm safety training to a single child who does not already have access. The legislature has no authority over curriculum. And this is already a done deal, folks. The State Board already accepted this language with more flexibility. It's an unnecessary and irrelevant bill. Also want to clear up that crisis drills are already required as part of Safe and Secure Schools. You can also find that on the KSD website. And 2 years ago, I would have been the liaison from the state board, Dr. Dina Horst and I. I didn't sit up in the galley, and I doubt if Dr. Horst did as well. But why would we say over my dead body when it was already our policy? So I would have to question that whole scenario. I encourage you to table this bill and ask the proponents to find a more effective way to promote firearm safety. This bill simply tries to shift blame for gun violence to kids and away from adults who are the real problem. Active shooter drills are already required by law. You might think about requiring gun safety and training for adults instead. Thank you, and with that, I'd stand for questions.
Body, are there any questions? Representative Schmo?
Schmoey.
It is good to see you, Ann.
Thank you.
All right, I have a couple questions, with the chair's permission. We have been talking about this since 2016, 2018. Why hasn't it been a bigger deal to this state board? I know that you're not currently sitting in your old position, and that you're just here representing yourself and your views, your kids, your grandkids. Why haven't they pushed implementation of this if you guys already have something to do that? Why are we allowing kids for the last 8 to 10 years to not be receiving this safety training, the stop, don't touch, run away, tell a grown-up? Why are we letting these kids fall through the cracks?
I'm not sure what you mean by promote. Again, I'm not on the state board, but I was on there in 2023 when we took another look at gun safety training. 44 districts already offer it.
44 out of how many?
280. But we laid it out there. We put it out in the Safe and Secures Act, which is has 9 standards to it. A lot of things schools have to do. Go to ks.gov and take a look at the Safe and Secure Schools Act. I'm sure Representative McNorton will be familiar with this. There is a long list of things schools have to do for safe and secure schools. Firearm safety is just one of those. I don't know that it's as important as some of the other things they should do in terms of hardening the schools and that kind of thing. But when I was there, the state board did promote this, and so there you go.
Only 44 schools, okay.
But that doesn't mean 44 out of 286. Check the population of those schools, and then you'll have the percent of students who actually have access. It may be greater than 1/7.
And another question, if I may. Since we're not asking permission to teach, and it's already available to teach, and we are, with this bill, only setting the gold standard of stop, don't touch, run away, tell a grown-up, and then utilizing our hunter safety that we already have. I do recall that there are other instances where schools are actively putting the onus on students, such as stop, drop, and roll. I mean, we're not asking a firefighter to stop, drop, and roll. We're asking a student. We're not asking their parent. We're asking a student. Just say no. We're not asking the parent to just say no. We're not asking the drug dealer to just say no. We're asking the student to just say no. So I'm kind of wondering why, in this instance, we shouldn't be training our kids with the gold standard like we do in stop, drop, and roll and just say no.
Well, okay, we're talking about 2 different things. If you're talking in terms of firearm safety education, if you call Eddie Eagle the gold standard, it's already there. But exactly what you're talking about is required of kids in crisis drills.
Yes, so why is this different? Why do you not want to put the onus on the kids?
I'm not sure what you're asking. I mean, we have crisis drills. We have firearm safety education available. what more would you like the state board to do? I don't know.
I'm saying that in your testimony, just now, you were saying that we shouldn't be putting the onus on kids.
Oh,
We
okay.
should be putting it on adults. I am
Yeah.
pointing out different things that we already put the onus on children. So
And we
could
do,
you
and
please explain?
Teaching them what to do when you see a gun is not a bad idea, you know, not bad. But the notion that we have to train kids because that's the most important thing, no, in my mind, the most important thing would be to train the adults to lock their guns up and keep them away from kids and keep them safe and know how to handle them properly. Both things have to be done.
Thank you, Chair. And I will note that if you apply that same logic to fire safety and just say no to drugs, then it gets a little murky there. Thank you.
Representative McNorton.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Mall. The Safe and Secure Schools already has this in their approved curriculum or part of the Safe and Secure Schools.
Well,
So,
okay.
so why is it only 44 of the 286 districts have taught this instead of more? And you said that they use the wildlife and parks, which is for the older kids. Do you know if any of those have used the program for the younger kids in grade school?
Oh, I mean, I think some of them do use Eddie Eagle. You'd have to check with the department to get a copy of that survey. They could tell you exactly what schools. I mean, does Seaman teach this?
We have hunter safety, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you'd have to check with that survey. They did a survey in 2023 of schools, but the reason there are 44 is because exactly what everybody's been talking about. It's not a mandate. It's an option. So schools that want to do it can take advantage of these options.
Okay, but we don't know out of your number there, how many is Eddie Eagle or the higher one for the high school kids?
The department does.
They
did
do,
a survey
okay.
of that. So if you want, you could contact John Calvert and he could help you out on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, trying to move this right along. Representative Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Actually, I was just going to ask Ann, hi, if this was a mandate or not, and you just cleared that up, so I appreciate that because it sounds like based on the questions that the last two representative asked, they were misunderstanding. So the school board offers these programs, however, it is not a mandate, correct?
The State Department of Education
meant,
does not offer a program. They adopted what the legislature wrote back in 2018, which is more flexible for schools than what's in this bill, that if they wanted to offer firearm safety education, they had Eddie Eagle, they had Wildlife and Parks, or evidence-based curriculum, which I'm happy to hear the State Firearms Association supports because that's not in this bill. But it is optional, and
so this bill, from what I understood from other conferees, still makes it optional, correct? So Sure,
Yeah.
but we already have that established standard, so.
Yeah, and I think it's important to note that this only appeared in legislation back in 2018. When it disappeared in 2019, the State Board of Education could have dropped it, but they did not. They kept the language, and it's been there ever since as an option for districts. If they want to consider firearm safety education, these are the standards.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the question.
Representative Howell.
Thank you, Chair. Very briefly, thank you so much, Ann, for being here today. The bill that we are considering in front of us today addresses the Eddie Eagle program for the primary grades, kindergarten through 5, and then the mixture for grades 6 through 8 of the Eddie Eagle program and our Wildlife and Parks program and or hunter safety program, and then 9 through 12, the hunter safety program. And I just was wondering if you are aware that the NRA is donating the curriculum for the Eddie Eagle, and so there's no cost to that to our schools. And then our hunter safety programs are paid for by the Pittman-Robertson dollars. So there is no cost to these programs. So these are being funded. So I was wondering if you are aware of that, and by actually only using these 2 programs, we're actually making sure there is no cost to our schools. And so I was wondering if you could speak to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm aware that those are all available. But I think it's also important to throw in that other option of any other evidence-based youth firearm safety program as an option. It doesn't have to cost a school anything. If they find another evidence-based program that has a cost to it, they certainly don't have to do it. But I don't think most of them do. I think even those other evidence-based programs are free. So I'm not sure why cost came up as an issue before. It's not an issue.
You just in your testimony said that we should fund it. So that's why I responded back to that.
I hear what you're saying, yeah. That if you want to expand it, if you wanted to incentivize more than 44 districts to do it, what you might say is, let us help you out in some way, see what we could do. If there is any cost, I mean, some of them might have, guns, I don't know what you call them when they're like not real guns, but, equipment that they might want to buy for their program outside of the curriculum. Maybe you could offer that.
Representative Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for coming. I believe you started your oral testimony by saying you believed that this bill was unconstitutional. Is that right?
I believe it violates the Constitution of Kansas and the authority of the State Board of Education, yes.
Yeah, and you cited for that proposition the idea that the State Board of Education has, I think you said, full authority over curriculum. Is that right?
Curriculum and standards, yes, that's what the court said.
I didn't see a citation in your written testimony. Do you have a citation for me on that?
I could get you one if you want. This has been hashed out in court numerous times.
Right. And when you say full authority, does that also mean exclusive authority? For instance, the board could have full authority as well as the legislature.
That's a great question, so let me clarify that. The court also said, yes, the legislature may involve itself in education policy, but it must be in harmony with what the state board's policies already are and not derogatory to. So yes, we could both play in this field, but the legislature has to do things that are in harmony with the state board. That's from court side as well.
I've also looked at Attorney General Schmidt's opinion in this area, and I think that's also something we should reference when we're talking about constitutionality and the prerogatives and the authority of the state board on the one hand and the legislature on the other. Thank you.
Absolutely, and I would note that the Attorney General's opinion is only advisory and not law, but court opinion would supersede that, and it's very clear.
My understanding is it's still a relatively open question. That's why we had to have the Attorney General weigh in on that.
But there's no reason to fight over this. The State Board of Education was in agreement with the legislature over what to do with firearm safety, so it's there.
All right, not seeing any more questions. Ann, I appreciate you coming here.
I appreciate the time. Thank you guys so much.
And I want to thank you for your service as a House of Representative and also on the State Board.
Well, I laughingly say I spent 4 years on Fed and State, and when they let me off, I knew there was a God. So thank you very much.
Very well. Committee, I'd like to point your attention also in the packet. There are several written opponents on this as well. So please check that out and look those over. And with that, we are adjourned.